Passive voice is one of those things English teachers love to draw big red lines through. This video explains what it is, shows how to avoid it, and provides a few examples of when it is okay. First of all, why do teachers tend to hate passive voice so much? Here are two quotes from George Orwell from his essay, Politics and the English Language. The gist of his essay is that academics often use strange sentence structures, including and especially passive voice, in order to hide the fact that they aren't saying anything useful. He's frustrated with lazy language because it leads to lazy thought. Language does affect how we think. For example, it can be used to pass off responsibility, as in Ronald Reagan's famous "mistakes were made," which sounds much nicer though less apologetic than "I made mistakes." Orwell sees passive voice as a symptom of lazy, thoughtless, or inaccurate writing, but it isn't always. Let's take a look at a definition and a few examples. The typical sentence structure, as you'll recall from previous videos, is a character followed by an action, or state of being. Usually, there is a recipient of that action, called the object. In this sentence, Grant ate the spaghetti, you have a character, Grant, an action, ate, and an object, spaghetti. Passive voice is when you take the object and place it at the start of the sentence as opposed to the subject. So it follows the pattern object, action, then character. This can be awkward, like in this example. The ball was hit by the batter. The batter is the one performing the action, hitting. So it makes more sense to place him at the start of the sentence, so we have an easier time picturing what is happening in our minds. The batter hit the ball is both shorter and clearer. Passive voice can also be used to mask responsibility. Look at this example. While new changes are always being made by professionals, these changes were made by our group, which is led by Mr. Harbinger. That sounds less like a confession than it does a casual statement of fact. But if we rewrite it to put our characters in the subject position, we get, while professionals often make new changes, Mr. Harbinger led our group to make these changes. That version is clearer and paints a more accurate picture. Now it's your turn to practice. In each of the sentences below, ask yourself who is doing the action. Then rephrase the sentence so that character is at the beginning. If you'd like to take a moment to pause here, go ahead. Then resume the video to see the answers. The first two were pretty straightforward, though there are multiple ways of changing them, as you can see here. The last one, though, about the player and the fans, isn't any clearer now. In fact, it sounds kind of awkward. That's because the object, the player, is the most important part of the sentence, so it's okay for it to come first. Sometimes it is okay to use passive voice. That said, it is only rarely a good idea, and you usually want to avoid it. Look at these two examples. In the first case, even though it is the jury who's doing the action, not convicting OJ, OJ is the focus, so we put him first. In the second example, we don't know who wrecked the car, so passive voice is also acceptable, since we're not sure of who the character should be. If we wanted to make it active, though, we could just say, somebody wrecked the car. That does it for passive voice. To practice, take 5 sentences you've previously written and identify if they are in active or passive voice. If they are in passive voice, change them to active. But if they are in active voice, which they probably will be, change them to passive. This isn't to encourage you to write in passive voice, but to familiarize you with what it looks like so you can have better control over your own writing.